Talking Patriots on the Friday Night Sports Wrap with Evan Lazar from CLNS Media. He writes for the Patriots. He's been covering the Pats for a few years now. Does a great job. Check out his work on clnsmedia.com. All right, Evan, let's jump right in. 5 weeks away until training camp. We actually got to see the Patriots do some off-season work this year. OTA's mini camp wrapped up. You were there in person and got to take the team in with your own eyes. What are your early impressions of the 2021 Patriots, and what can they build off of that you saw early on come training camp?
I think my early impressions actually have more to do with the defensive side of the ball than the offense. Everybody wants to talk about the quarterbacks, Johnny Smith, Hunter Henry. I get that. But on the defensive side of the ball, they have depth on all three levels, right? You're talking about in the front seven, a really rebuilt front seven by Bill Belichick through the draft, through free agency, guys coming back like Dante Hightower or signing Kyle Van Noy back from the Miami Dolphins. And I look at this defense and I think you start to see some of the pieces come together like that 2018 defense or like that 2019 defense that were really dominant by getting pressure on the quarterback, having a strong secondary that you can lean on. The Patriots have the makings of one of those better Belichick defenses that we've seen in the last half decade in terms of being able to do multiple things up front, rush the passer, blitz the quarterback, play some cover one man on the back end and get away with it with only one deep safety and do a whole lot of different things. And we know that's what Bill Belichick loves, right? Versatility, multiplicity. He wants to be able to change and morph week to week with his game plan on the defensive side of the ball. And I think they're set up to do that.
We'll talk about the offense in a bit, but your two biggest storylines, your two biggest things you're looking forward to most come training camp, aside from the offense, aside from the quarterback position.
I would say number one is how exactly Josh McDaniels pieces together these pass catchers, right? You bring in Nelson Aguilar, you bring in Hunter Henry, John, who I mentioned as well, Kendrick Bourne, certainly, Jacoby Myers still in the mix. So how does this look in terms of personnel groupings and how many guys they can get on the field at once? And where do those targets really go to? Because you spend all this money on those two tight ends, you figure the system's going to run through a lot of 12 personnel or two tight end sets, and I'm just kind of curious how they envision Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith going together, because that's what they sold back in March to free agency to both guys is, hey, we've been down this road before, we know how to use two tight ends here in New England, we know how to implement that kind of offense, but how they exactly deploy those guys I think is going to be really fascinating. Jonnu Smith, certainly one of those players that can line up all over the formation. In Tennessee, you saw him line up in the backfield, some off the line of scrimmage, detached from the formation, in line. So he's a very versatile player. Hunter Henry, more your traditional wide tight end that's going to play with his hand in the dirt or maybe out of the slot. So a lot of different kind of options and situations that Josh McDaniels can kind of pick apart with that offensive side of the ball. And on defense, is Stephon Gilmore going to be a New England Patriot? I think that's a really big question going into the season. And you have this entire offseason. We've been joking on CLNS about it being uncharacteristically aggressive for the Patriots, right? Just all year offseason long, you draft a quarterback in the first round, you pay all these guys in free agency, not Bill Belichick's typical operating procedure. All that kind of seems to fall down if Stephon Gilmore isn't here, right? You built all these things on both sides of the football. You rebuilt your front seven, but then you lose your top cornerback. So Gilmore, I think, is a really important piece to this puzzle and is sort of the last piece that we didn't get to see at minicamp.
You bring up an interesting point about the pass-catching tight ends. Evan, do you believe with the addition of Smith and Henry, do you think that balances out maybe the lack of top-tier talent at the wide receiver position due to, Henry and Smith's ability to get down the field and catch passes?
Absolutely, and I think that's really where the Patriots were headed with this. The league right now is overpaying wide receivers. Every wide receiver that is in that top tier is getting between $15 and $20 million a year. So instead of doing that and paying one guy $18 million and having to go bargain shopping in the other positions, Bill Belichick just paid two guys a little bit less. And that's a pretty typical Belichick kind of just approach, I would say. And with Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, what I love so much about them is, in my previous answer, is just how well they complement each other. I do think that these guys win in a little bit of different ways. Hunter Henry is a very technical route runner. He's very good at the top of the route, coming in and out of his breaks. Jonnu Smith is an athlete, really good with the ball in his hands, really good at creating downfield separation vertically by going above the defense, catching those contested balls up the seam or in the red zone. So they do a lot of different different things differently. They complement each other extremely well. I'm sure Josh McDaniels has been in the lab since March cooking up ways to use these two guys. And it's really going to come down to who's playing quarterback and what that quarterback strengths are in terms of how exactly they're going to deploy both of those tight ends.
All right, under center now with the quarterback position. Let's start with the incumbent in Cam Newton. What is the case to start him come week one, considering he's at full health and he shows his capabilities in training camp? And what's the case to maybe sit him and put him as the backup or potentially cut him?
Well, I think the case to start Cam is what we saw last year, and that is his athleticism brings a lot to the table that the Patriots haven't necessarily had with a guy like Tom Brady under center. He rushed for 12 touchdowns last year, over 600 yards. You get into those zone read or gap read concepts where the quarterback is an option to run with the football. You get into things like quarterback design runs on the goal line or short yardage that we saw last year a whole lot of as well. And those things are interesting wrinkles that the Patriots have never been able to really go and dip their toes into. So now that they have that sort of quarterback, now that they've had a full off season to prepare for that sort of quarterback, last year they kind of dipped their toes in the water. They weren't exactly all in on it because they didn't have the time to install that kind of running game. It's similarly to what the Baltimore Ravens ran into Lamar Jackson's rookie year. He took over for Joe Flacco, and they did some of the stuff that we've seen Baltimore do, but it was really that next year, that second year when Lamar won MVP, where they were able to put in the entire Lamar Jackson offense. And maybe the Patriots could do something like that. And you also have to speak to Cam's leadership and just his infectious energy that we can see just out there at practice when we were able to go out there, just how much people gravitate towards him, how much energy he brings to the practice field and on game day. I think that's a lot of things there to support Cam Newton. But on the other hand, I think the biggest thing with Cam that I see is that from a scheme fit perspective in Josh McDaniels' traditional passing offense, he's not a great fit for what they like to do. They want somebody that is a quick decision maker, that gets the football out, that throws the ball accurately, and for the most part is just efficient and kind of just decisive with his decisions and really has a good consistency to him. You know, McDaniels' scheme is not one where you have to necessarily be Patrick Mahomes and run around and throw the ball 75 yards in the air, right? He's somebody that really wants to win by death by 1,000 paper cuts. And if they're going to play that kind of offense, then Cam Newton does not really fit that type of scheme. He's more of a playmaker than somebody that is just going to sit there in the pocket like Tom Brady and you send 5 eligible receivers and he's going 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not really going to be Cam Newton. So if they want to play that kind of offense, then Cam has never really been a great scheme fit for that system. So that's kind of the knock on Cam, I think, with McDaniels and that pairing, is that it just doesn't fit well together in terms of what McDaniels is good at calling and what Cam is good at running.
Ultimately, do you think the offense will stay vanilla in terms of kind of what they've done in the past, or do you think they reshape the entire offense now, thinking and going in, to the season thinking that Cam Newton will be the starter?
It's a good question because last year I did feel like they were trying to jam a round hole in a square peg at times, right? Where they had to kind of fall back on their foundation of Tom Brady's offense for the last 20 years. And like I said, it just wasn't a great fit for Cam. And the one thing that you really heard out of Josh McDaniels a lot is that it's not changing your system, it's adapting your system. So McDaniels feels a little bit married to that system that he's been successful with. So if that's going to be the case, and I really do think that eventually McDaniels is going to look at these two quarterbacks and say, I can do more of the stuff that I want to do with Mac Jones than I can with Cam Newton, just because of the stylistic types of things and the way that the two guys play the position. So if McDaniels wants Cam to start, then they really need to change the system. Like, they need to fundamentally strip the system down and change it and make it what Cam would be good at: vertical passing, a little bit more holding the football in the pocket and letting things develop down the field, letting him use his legs, obviously, as a runner. If they want to keep the system the way it's been under Tom Brady for 20 seasons and the way that they've been so successful, then Mac Jones is going to start sooner rather than later.
Ultimately, come week one, assuming, again, like I said earlier in our conversation, if both Mac Jones and Cam Newton stay healthy and play to their potential, who is the quarterback come week one?
week one, I think it will be Cam. And I think there's a lot to be said for easing Mac Jones into it and not necessarily sitting him for his entire rookie season, but at least sitting him for the first half or the first 6 weeks. And you have that game in week 4 against Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I know Bill Belichick will put the best quarterback out there, or the guy that he thinks gives him the best chance to win that particular day. But I don't know if you necessarily want to pit Mac Jones against Brady like that in a marquee game and Brady's first game back in Foxborough. It does feel like a game that would be much easier to just give to a veteran like Cam Newton and let it see what happens with Cam out there against Brady. I don't know if you want to get into the Brady Mac Bowl, right, where you're talking about Mac being the true successor, because Cam's kind of the bridge and Mac is the guy that they've drafted to be the true successor. I don't know if you really want to get into all those narratives and put that kind of pressure on the rookie. So I'm going to say Cam is going to start early on in the year and in week 1. But I really do think, like I said, that McDaniels eventually is going to favor Mac.
All right, that's your Pats fix here on the Friday Night Sports Wrap. He's Evan Lazar. Once again, check out his work on Twitter at EZLazar and at clnsmedia.com. You can check out all of his video work, his written work. He does a great job up in Foxborough. Evan, we'll see you during the season. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Morey.